The trade deadline is almost upon us, and to break down some of the logistics of how teams operate and what they do and what exactly Jed Hoyer is doing on the phone all the time, I have Katie Krall with me. So let's start there, Katie. It's interesting, you were telling me about how different organizations approach the distribution of calls differently, which is something, I just never thought of. I feel like I'm always digging into the numbers with you, but this is more of like a human thing. How many hours on the phone do you think Jed Hoyer spends over the next week and a half?
Oh my gosh, a ton, Lance. It's a good thing that no longer rollover minutes are a thing.
Absolutely.
So if you're a front office, you can do two things. You can have a divide and conquer strategy where you take your assistant GMs and you say, okay, Lance Brozdowski has the Cardinals, the Orioles, and the Blue Jays, and then Katie Krall takes the Padres, the Brewers, and the Twins. And so then we would funnel the information back to the roster construction group and say, hey, here's who's available from Minnesota. Here is who we think that the Twins will move. The other thing that you can do is you can be a one-man show. So you can have all of the conversations be funneled into the singular president of baseball operations or general manager. The value proposition of that is then there's no game of telephone. So you can juxtapose what the Rockies are offering against what the Angels have talked to you about because you're the person who has been the source of truth.
I see. And what do you think, in your experience in front offices and stuff, what do you think is the more efficient system, or does it just depend on the leadership?
I actually prefer the dissemination. I think that being able to strengthen relationships with other teams is really valuable. So then the Twins know they always go to Lance, or the Brewers know they always go to Katie. And so whether it's offseason, trade deadline, you then develop that rapport with the team. And there are very often instances, as you know, where trades may not get done in that moment, but then the groundwork is laid for future considerations. And so if you have those repeated interactions, I think it then increases the likelihood of a favorable deal.
Yeah, that's a fantastic segue, because I want to talk to you about how we heard Jed Hoyer a couple of years ago talk about how the foundation for the winter Kyle Tucker trade with the Astros and Dana Brown, the foundation for that was set more at the deadline. We didn't really hear about it at the deadline, which I think is a big thing to keep in mind, as you see a lot of Bob Nightingale and John Heyman tweets, is the things that perhaps are the most relevant are not things surfacing to the reporters in the media for us to understand exactly what those two teams are talking about. But that foundation being laid at the deadline is almost as important as the deals get done, right?
Completely. I think of Ernest Hemingway and the Iceberg Theory of
Name
writing. Yes, any opportunity to mention great American writers on this show. So when you think of the Iceberg Theory, right, you see a portion of it, you see the top, but there's a lot underneath in that meaning that doesn't necessarily get easily discerned. So from the roster construction perspective, you can have lots of conversations, you can send a bunch of texts, you can kick the tires on a number of deals, and then ultimately it might lead to something. But so I think fans might be disappointed in some years. Oh, my team didn't do anything, or I didn't see the headline transaction that I was hoping for, when in actuality, maybe there were super productive conversations. They just didn't manifest or materialize in the execution of a deal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we're talking about how the cataloging process works for these conversations. I could see now how that's so important, given that something you're talking about at the deadline may be very relevant in December, even if it's not relevant at the exact time of the deadline. But let's talk about pro scouting too. I find pro scouting fascinating because this is something, a department generally, like the scouts literally going to Major League Baseball games, that teams have cut back on just because the prevalence of data allows you to evaluate players in a way where you almost don't even need that human perception on the guy, because the model can spit out a surplus value, and that's what the team's going to bring to the table in deciding whether to do a trade or not. So the value of pro scouts now convinced me that they're still relevant.
You want the argument in favor of pro
Yes,
scouts?
I do.
I completely understand your argument. And I think that it's a super inefficient process in many ways, right? Like when you do draft coverage for MLB Network, imagine if I said to you, okay, Lance, I need you to write up 300 players, but I'll probably only ask you about 3.
Yeah.
That's a lot of Lance Brozdowski time spent on 297 players you're never going to touch. So a pro scout is the same job. You see a ton of guys, you write up reports, and maybe best case scenario, your org acquires or moves 3. I think from a system perspective, being able to juxtapose your own system against the potential acquisition is the real value proposition.
Okay.
So obviously you have projection models, and I'm able to think through, you mentioned surplus value, how the guy would rank, but I want to see how he would compare to our upper minor league infield prospect. I also want to get a sense of sequencing, like how he uses his pitches, the way that he will adapt if something's not working. So I do think, even though the department has been diluted, I don't think it's a total eradication will ever happen, because I think there is still value for an in-person look.
Yeah, it's almost like what they're looking at perhaps has changed. And I think that's maybe where the public's perception of that role is maybe lost a little. It's like they're not looking at, does this guy have a good fastball? It's like, no, we have models that can do that. You don't need your thoughts on it. It's more about, hey, the model says it's a good fastball. I've seen that thing 200 times, and I don't think it's good. So, like, how do you reconcile that? But these pro scouts are incredibly important at the deadline, right?
Yes. So if I'm in a pro scouting role, I basically will get calls based on my organizational coverage. So let's say I cover the Twins and the Blue Jays, and we're potentially making a deal with those two clubs. Hey, Katie, you've written up these guys. Who do you like? In an instance where I've been able to see prospects, like I said, and I can compare and contrast, well, I would like this player in favor of this player. So the true purpose of the reports and what I'm trying to do is I'm writing this report so that if and when we had a chance to acquire this player, would I want him or not? You don't need, you mentioned the data collection. I don't need to chart how fast Joe Ryan's fastball is. Like, I can find that instantly.
No doubt.
I don't need to know Ryan Jeffers' catcher framing numbers. I have all that. But what I really want to provide is my subject matter expertise on whether or not this player would help us get to the playoffs or if this player would help us rebuild our system.
Makes a lot of sense. Is trade deadline your favorite time of the year? Is it draft? Is it free agency? Is it arbitration? What is it?
Interesting question. Those are like such great inflection points. The trade deadline is really exciting. When I was with the Reds in 2020 and 2021, we made the playoffs in 20, just missed in 21. But to add Michael Givens and to think through how we could bolster our bullpen in order to make a run at the playoffs, that was really exciting to be a part of. Like, that's why you log the hours. That's why you're part of that team to get to October.
I think from a fan's perspective, this is one of the most exciting times of the year. Trade deadline coming up. Katie Krall, thanks for breaking it down with me.